Welcome. Let's discuss how we can add and subtract complex numbers. Let's take a look at one example at a time. In example A, we have the complex number of 2 minus 5i, and we want to subtract the complex number of 3 minus 8i. A strategy that we can do when we are adding or subtracting complex numbers is to combine reals with reals and imaginaries with imaginaries. So let's drop the parentheses to make this cleaner. In our first number, we have 2 minus 5i, but because we are subtracting here, how about we distribute this down? So now instead of having 3, let's have negative 3. And when we distribute this negative down, instead of having negative 8i, we're going to have positive 8i. Negative times a negative, it is positive. Now let's combine reals with reals. So 2 minus 3, that's going to give us negative 1. And now let's combine imaginary with imaginary. Negative 5i plus 8i, that is going to give us positive 3i. And now we are done. You can also think of this as we were just combining like terms. Those that have no i's on it, which in this case was 2 and negative 3. That's how we got negative 1. And those that had an I on it, negative 5i and positive 8i. That's how we got 3 i's. Let's take a look at example B. So one more time, here we have two complex numbers. 1 minus 7i, that's one complex number, and 4 plus 2i, that's another complex number. Now let's drop the parentheses to make this cleaner. In our first parenthesis, there's nothing in front of it, so let's just bring everything down. And in our second parenthesis, we are adding, so we can just bring that down as well, as adding 4 and as adding 2i. And now let's combine reals with reals, which in this case, it's 1 and positive 4. When we add them up, that's positive 5. And now let's combine imaginaries with imaginaries, which in this case is negative 7i. And now let's add 2i, which is going to give us a total of negative 5i. So we are done. Let's take a look at example C. So let's start by identifying the complex numbers that we are combining. 3 minus 2i, that is one complex number, and 5 minus 1i, that's another complex number. Let's drop the parentheses to make it cleaner. In our first parenthesis, there's nothing in front of it, so let's just bring that down. And in our second parenthesis, we have a negative in front of it. We can distribute that negative. So instead of having 5, we're going to get negative 5. And when we distribute our second, instead of having negative 1i, we're going to get positive 1i. Negative times a negative, it is a positive. So now let's combine reals with reals, which in this case is the value of 3, and it is the value of negative 5. They do not have an I on them. They are real numbers. And when we combine them, that's going to give us negative 2. And now let's combine imaginaries with imaginaries, which in this case is negative 2i and positive 1i. And when we combine them, we get negative 1i. So we are done. Now, one thing to notice, it's the same expression we could have also written as just negative 2 minus I. Either or, they represent the same thing. Now let's take a look at our last example. So here we have our two complex numbers, 3 minus 2i and 5 minus 1i. Let's drop the parentheses to make it cleaner. In our first parenthesis, there's nothing in front of it, so let's just bring everything down. In our second parenthesis, we are adding, so there's no need to distribute. Let's just bring everything down. So we're going to get positive 5 and negative 1i. And now let's combine reals with reals, which in this case is 3 and positive 5. That's going to give us positive 8. And now let's combine imaginary with imaginary, which in this case is negative 2i and negative 1i. When we combine them, we're going to get negative 3i. So we are done. We have added the two given complex numbers.
Hello.
If you would like to continue learning about mathematics, you can check out the videos on the left.